We should start.
Okay. Hello everyone. Today we will talk about introduction to JavaScript. But before going into what is JavaScript, we will talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML defines the content of web pages. That is the meaning about the web pages, or the content about the. Guys, I'll start again. Sorry. Can you go back to the previous slide? Hello everyone, today we will talk about introduction to JavaScript. But before going into what is JavaScript, we will talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML defines the content of web pages. That is, it defines the meaning and structure of the web content in HTML. CSS specifies the layout of web pages, that is about the appearance and presentation wise of any web pages. And finally, JavaScript is used for programming for programming the behavior of web pages, that is for its functionality. Next. Scripting languages. There are two types of scripting languages. The first one is client-side scripting, used for verifying simple validations at the client side. And the second point is that it enables the enhancement and manipulation of web pages and client browsers. Some examples of client-side scripting are VBScript, JavaScript, and JScript. Now the second type of scripting languages is server-side scripting. This one is used for verification of databases, and it enables backend access to databases, file systems, and servers. And its examples are ASP, GSP, and servlets. This can be represented as shown on the diagram on the slide. Next. Now let's talk what is JavaScript. JavaScript is a client-side scripting language invented in 1995 by Netscape Corporation. It was originally known as LiveScript. Next point, it is an object-based programming language used to add interactivity to HTML web pages. JavaScript was standardized by ECMA, which is the European Computer Manufacturer Association, and it is also called ECMA script. JavaScript is also used to execute code in the client browser and design web pages from HTML documents. Therefore, JavaScript is dynamic, lightweight, and case sensitive. Now, what can we do with JavaScript? JavaScript can change HTML content, change HTML attributes, change CSS, validate data entered by the user, and can react to events. Using all this, you'll get users from JavaScript, which can be shown from the diagram, like web applications can be developed. It is used in web development, mobile applications, games development, presentation and slideshows, server application, web servers. It is used to display time and data. It is also used in client-side validation. It is used to display pop-up windows and blocks. It is also used to animate elements, and finally, it can also be used in dynamic drop-down menus. Now, next. Next, please. Now, we'll talk about the differences between Java and JavaScript. Java and JavaScript are two different types of scripting languages, but here you can see how they are different. Like Java is compiled whereas JavaScript is interpreted. And Java is mainly used for backend programming, whereas JavaScript is used for front-end programming. Java is executed in JVM or in the browser, whereas JavaScript is only executed in the browser. Java allows better security, whereas JavaScript needs more effort to enhance security. In Java, we use static type checking, whereas in JavaScript, we use dynamic type checking. The syntax is similar to C++ in Java, whereas the syntax for JavaScript is much more similar to C programming. In Java, it requires Java Development Kit, which is also known as JDK, whereas JavaScript can be written in any text editor. Finally, Java can be used in various apps, whereas JavaScript is mainly used for web apps. Next. Now we have PHP versus JavaScript. What are the differences between PHP and JavaScript? PHP is a server-side scripting language, whereas JavaScript is a client-side scripting language. PHP is used for back-end development, whereas JavaScript is used mainly in front-end development. PHP is more secure as it is not visible in the browser, whereas JavaScript has tools for enhancing security but needs more effort to do so. PHP helps to build high-level interactive web pages, whereas JavaScript helps to build user-friendly creative web pages. In PHP, there is slow performance, whereas JavaScript has very high and fast performance. PHP has more features available compared to JavaScript, but in JavaScript there is less load on a server and less server traffic. PHP is combined with HTML only, whereas JavaScript is combined with HTML, XML, and Ajax. In PHP, we can use WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla, whereas in JavaScript we use AngularJS and React.js. Finally, best for e-commerce and other websites using CMS is PHP, whereas JavaScript is best for dynamic SPAs. Next. Now where to put JavaScript. JavaScript is placed using the script tag, or the script can be taken from the file which typically contains the extension .js. You can have any number of scripts, which is can be 100 or more. Scripts can be placed in the head section or in the body section, or both. In the head section, scripts are run before the page is displayed, whereas in the body section, scripts are run as a page is displayed. In the head section, it is the right place to define functions and variables that are used by scripts within the body section. Next. Here you can see how the scripts can be in the head section. The code will be as follows, and the scripting part will be after the head section. Whereas the script in body section, all the important scripting part will be after the body section. This is a format of how the scripting code should be. Next. Now scripts in both body and head section. From the set of codes you can see that there is both scripting text in the head section and the body section. Now, using external JavaScript, scripts can also be loaded from external files. This is useful if you have complicated script or set of subroutines that are used in several different documents. When you have to use external JavaScript, you will have to use the script code as follows, where it will contain the .js part. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, now let us discuss about JavaScript values and variables. Primitive types. It is a value which has no properties or methods. A primitive data type is a data type which has a primitive value. In JavaScript, we have 5 types of primitive data: number, string, boolean, null, and define. Number method converts a value to a number. A string, it is a sequence of characters which are used to represent text. In boolean, we have only true values, which is true or false. Null, we have nothing to do with it. Undefined, which is a variable without a value, has a value undefined. Variables. As we know, variables are used for storing data. There are 4 ways to declare variables in JavaScript: using var, let, const, nothing. Scope of var variable is functional scope, whereas coming to let, it is block scope. In const also it is a block scope. Var can be updated and redeclared into the scope. Let can be updated but cannot be redeclared. Const neither be updated nor be redeclared. Var can be declared without initialization. Let can be declared without initialization. And const, it cannot be declared without initialization. Var can be accessed without initialization as its default value is undefined. Whereas coming to let, it cannot be accessed without initialization as it returns an error. Const cannot be accessed without initialization as it cannot be declared without initialization. Now, as you can see here, some strings. The most familiar string methods are here includes, which returns if a string contains a specified value. Repeat, returns a new string with a number of copies of a string. Slice, which extracts a part of string and returns a new string. Split, as we know, it splits a string into an array of substring. Lowercase, uppercase, it returns a string converted to lowercase or uppercase letters. String indexing. The characters in a string can be located using their index value, which represents their position in the string. We start the indexing from 0 to n. Enclosing the index in square brackets, we'll select a single character from a string. As you can see, syntax here: string in square brackets, index number. Characters are indexed from left to right, starting from position 0. It should not be started with 1. Blank spaces are also counted in this string method. Example, as we can see, hello. When we ask for string of 0, it counts H. And when we ask for 2, it counts L. String template literals. Template literals are literals delimited with backticks, allowing embedded expressions called substitutions. Untagged template literals result in strings, which makes them useful for string interpolation. That means at multi-line strings, since unescaped new lines are allowed. Tagged template literals call a function, the tag function, with an array of any text segment from the literal followed by arguments with the value of any substitutions, which is used for DSLs. Boolean. In Boolean, we have two values, true or false. As you can see here, 10 is greater than 9, which results in true.
Hello, hello. JavaScript operators. No. JavaScript operators are the symbols that are used to perform operation on operands. JavaScript arithmetic operators. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, increment, decrement. These are the arithmetic operators in JavaScript. Next slide. Next slide. JavaScript comparison operators is equal to, identical, not equal to, not identical, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. These are the comparison operators in JavaScript. Next slide. JavaScript logical operators. Logical and logical or logical not. Logical and it will check the both conditions. If both conditions are true, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. Logical or it also checks both the conditions. If both conditions are false, it returns false. Otherwise, it returns true. Logical not. If it is true, it returns false. If it is false, it returns true. Next slide. Conditional statements in JavaScript. Else. If statement. If statement is used to specify a block of JavaScript code to execute it if the condition is true. This is the syntax for if statement. Next slide. Else statement. If the condition is false, then else statement will execute. This is the syntax. If condition is false, then else block will get executed. Next slide. Else if statement. If we want to check for multiple conditions, then else if statement is used. If the first condition is false, then else if statement is executed. And finally, else block will get executed. Thank you.
Next slide. Introduction to arrays. An array is a special variable which can hold more than one value. Constants all below BNW. An array can hold many values under a single name, and you can access the values by referring to index number. Creating an array syntax. Const array name equals to item 1, item list. It can be It is a common practice to declare arrays with the const variable. JavaScript data objects. JavaScript data object lets us work with class with IST types. Creating data objects. Data objects are created with the new data constructor. There are four ways to create a new data object. Let us see in the slide. Data data objects are static items. Timing is ticking, but data objects are JavaScript data format. JavaScript data formats. JavaScript data input. There are generally three types of JavaScript data input formats. I, ISD, ISD examples data, IS, IST time, short data, on date, long data, JavaScript data output. Independent of input formats, JavaScript will be output dates in a full string text string format. Java math object. JavaScript math object. The JavaScript math objects allow you to perform mathematical tasks on numbers. With an example, doc type HTML. HTML body channel the syntax. Output has is the math. The, the math objects. Uh, Unlike other objects, the math object has no constructor. The math object is static. All methods and properties can be used without creating math objects first. Math properties. Constant syntax of the math properties is math.property. JavaScript provides 8 mathematical constants that can be accessed in math properties. Examples: math.e, math.py, math.square to, and so on, math.logic. JavaScript regExpression reference. Regexp object and regular expression is a pattern of characters. The pattern is used to do pattern matching functions on text. In JavaScript, a regExpression object is a pattern with properties and methods. Syntax slash pattern dot slash modifier. Example: let pattern equals to slash w3 school. The properties to search for in is as shown in an example. Thank you.
Coming to the next topic, JavaScript functions, which is an important topic of JavaScript. Next slide. Functions. What are functions? Functions are reusable procedures. Actually, functions allow us to write reusable and modular code. We can define a chunk of code and we can wrap them so that we can use them at a later point of time. Every function has two steps. First step is defining a function. Second step is running a function. First step is defining a function is given here. Syntax for the definition of the function is given here. Function is a keyword followed by function name, followed by parameters, followed by the block of code. Running a function. A function can be run once on any type, again and again, depending upon the program. Next. Let us have an advanced look at functions. And our goals here are understanding the scope of functions, writing higher order functions, passing functions as callbacks. Next. So coming to the function expression is another syntax we can use to define functions. A function expression can be stored in a variable. After a function expression has been stored in a variable, the variable can be used as a function. Here we have a function expression constant square equal to function of num, return num star. Here the function takes the num as parameter and returns the square of the number and stores it in a variable called square. Here we have a diagram. The square represents the variable container and the function expression is stored in this variable container. Coming to scope of a function. A scope of a function is defining the variable visibility. Variable visibility and scope are the location where a variable is defined dictates the where we have to access that variable. Here the scope are three types: function scope, lexical scope and block scope. Function scope. Here we have an example function, bird watch, and we had defined the bird variable inside the function and outside the function. But the bird variable, when it is called outside the function, it cannot access the bird variable inside the function. The bird variable is scoped to the function itself. Next slide. Coming to block scope. This is what that differentiates the let and constant keywords from var keyword. Block scope is only for the let and constant keywords. The variables declared inside the block cannot be accessed outside the block for let and constant variables. Whereas for var keyword, they do not have block scope. The variables defined inside the block can be accessed outside the function. Here in the example, we have let variable declared inside a block. We cannot access it outside the block. Whereas here in the second picture, we have a var variable declared. It can be accessed anywhere out the block. What is lexical scope? Lexical scope in JavaScript means that the variable defines outside a function can be accessible inside another function defined after the variable declaration. But the opposite is not true. The variables defined inside a function will not be accessed outside that function. Here in the example, we have function getName. In that function, we have a myName variable which is written. The name variable myName is written is called outside. It is declared outside the function, but we can access it inside the function. But if we declare a variable inside the function, we cannot access it outside the function. Coming to higher order functions and callback functions. What are higher order functions? Higher order functions that operate on or with other functions, and they can be of two types. They can accept the functions as an argument or they can return a functions. Coming to functions as arguments, here we have an example. Here we have a function laugh which prints ha 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 on the console. And we have another function called twice function which takes a function as an argument and calls the function twice. And we are calling a call twice of laugh. This function calls call twice function by passing the laugh as parameter. Coming to returning functions. The function make between function is declared and it returns a function. So it is returning the function, so we call it as returning functions. Callback function. What are callback functions? Callback function is a function passed into another function as an argument, which is then invoked inside the outer function. Here we have a laugh, which is a callback function. This is because the function is passed into another function called twice, which is then invoked inside the call twice function. Next. Hoisting. This is the main concept of JavaScript. Hoisting is a JavaScript default behavior of moving all the declarations to the top of the function or top of the current script or current function. JavaScript declarations are often hoisted. In JavaScript, variable can be declared after it has been used. In other words, a variable can be used before it has been declared. Here we have two examples, example 1 and example 2. In the example 1, we have x equal to 5 variable, x is assigned to 5. But before it is being declared, it has been assigned. In the second example, we have declared the x first and then we have assigned the variable 5 to x, variable value 5 to x. Here both the examples yield the same result. This is an example of hoisting in JavaScript. Next. Arrow functions. Arrow functions are introduced in ES6. Arrow functions actually allow us to write a shorter function syntax. Here is the syntax of an arrow function. Let my function equal to, it takes parameters a and b and returns a into b. Here is a normal function hello, which returns hello world. After that, we can have another representation of this normal function hello using arrow functions. Here is the arrow function representation. What is this? This refers to the object. Actually, what refers to this depends upon how it is invoked. For example, if this is taken as a single, it represents to the global object. If it is using the object, it refers to an object. For call, apply, bind functions, etc., it refers to any event or any object. Next. Array callback methods. Array comes with many built-in methods that accept built callback functions. Now that we have covered callbacks, we can learn all these things, super useful callback methods. Our goals, our goals in this are to learn about for each, map, filter, find, reduce, sum, every methods. Next. For each method. This method accepts a callback function, calls that function once for every element in the array. Here we have an example. An array nums consists of numbers 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and so on. We call the for each function for this array nums, and the function takes an array as a parameter and returns the square of the function. So it takes 9 and returns 81, 8 and returns 64, and so on. Second example, nums.for each of function el. It takes an el as a parameter and checks if whether it is an even number or not. If it is an even number, it returns it. It prints it. Map creates an array, new array with the results of the calling a callback function on every element in the array. Here we have text array, rofl, consists of rofl, lol, omg, etc. Constant caps. Here we have map method that takes a function and it converts all the elements in the array to uppercase and stores them in a new array. Next. Find function. Return the value of element in the array that satisfies the provided testing function. Here we have an array of movies and we are finding the movie which includes the Mrs. word. So coming from the fanatic Mr. Fox, we don't have Mrs. Word. Next we have Mrs. Smith. Here we have Mrs. So it returns the Mrs. and Mr. Smith. Filter. It creates an array with all elements that pass the test implemented by the provided function. Here we have a constant nums consisting of numbers 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Constant odds. We are storing a filter method using nums and we are storing it in odds. So we take a modulo operation on every element. If it returns a reminder as 1, we will return 2. Otherwise no. Next. Reduce function executes a reducer function on each element of array, resulting in a single value. Here we have an array 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. We call a reduce method on this array. It takes two parameters, accumulator current value, and returns the sum of the accumulator and current value. Here accumulator stores the total of all the values and the current value stores each element of the array. Here in the table we have first call. First call, accumulator stores the first element of an array, current value stores the second element of an array. After the first call, the return value is sum of the accumulator and current value 8, and this total is stored in the 8 in the accumulator in the next call, and this process continues. Next. Next callback method is every. It tests whether every element in the array pass the function and it returns a bool value. Here we have constant words array. It consists of dog, dig, log, bag, etc. It checks whether every element consists of length 3. If it doesn't, then it returns false. At least if one element doesn't have a length 3, it will return false. Sum, similar to every but returns true if any of the array elements pass the test function. Here again we have an array of words dog, yellow, log, etc. And here we will be checking if any word consists of a length greater than 4. So if there is at least one word greater than 4, then it will be returning true, otherwise false. Next. Spread operator. Spread syntax allows an iterable such as an array to be expanded in places where 0 or more arguments or elements are expected, or an object expression to be expanded in places where 0 or more key value pairs are expected. Here we have an example, constant nums equal to 9, 3, 2, 8, etc. So math.max function always takes a series of numbers. It doesn't take an array. So if we use an array as the parameter for math.max function, it will be returning not an number. If you use spread, it expands the array into more arguments, and it gives it to the max function so that it executes and gives a max function, max value. Test parameters collects all the remaining arguments into an actual array. So it is opposite functionality of spread operator. It collects all the arguments and it stores them in an array. So function smaller takes a rest operator uh, followed by nums. So here we have, in the last we have sum all of 1 2. It collects 1 and 2 and stores them in a array. And here for let of nums total plus equal to n, it gives the total of all the elements in the array. Thank you.